Welcome back to week 5 with Now Dev Notes and me, Faith, your key study partner. We are over halfway through our application development series. Last week, we focused on how to create impactful forms that enhance the user experience. We also talked about how to move that form's functionality forward through the use of scripting. This week, we're going to focus on security and access controls. How do we ensure that the people we want to have access and no one else? Let's get started. So access. When we're talking about access, let's first think about what can be controlled. The first thing that we'll talk about will be our control to our applications and modules. And the way that we grant access to our applications and modules happens through roles. And roles are just collections of permissions that can be granted to either a user or a group.
To access the application menu for the study space scheduler, I don't have any roles or permissions. So that means any user that signed in can be able to access this application. And I don't want that. When I created my application in Studio initially, I did have roles that were created because it is always good to have scoped roles inside of a scoped application. I'm now going to add one of the scoped roles so that only the users that have that role will be able to view this application. And I move it over. This is going to be room request table user. I have added this role and I'm going to click update. And to show you what happens, if I impersonate a user that does not have this role, which again means that this user does not have the permission, when I look for a study space scheduler, they can't see the application. So now I want to add this user to this group so that they can actually access the application. So the preferred way to add a role to a user is to, instead of adding the role directly to the user, add that user to the group that has that role granted to it. So let me show you what that means. So in system security, we're going to go to groups and we're going to create a new group. The name for mine will just be room requesters. So these will be the people that are actually able to request a room because not everyone will be able to. And I'll type a quick description. Well, now I'm going to go into the group that I just created. So under roles, I'm now going to add the roles that will be granted to anyone inside of this group. So I'll click edit. And I want the role that I had from before, ESP room request table user. And I'm going to move that over and click save. And then I'm going to update. And there it is. Now this role is here. I then can add a group member. So click edit. And I'm going to click Alejandra and save to show that I'm adding her to this group so that she will now have this permission. And I'm going to save it. And now Alejandra will have access. So if I impersonate Alejandra and I look up study space scheduler, now she can see it because she was granted the role by adding her to the group that had this application's permission to view and request. I also created a role that would allow a user to see the room request module, but not the study space application. I'm going to impersonate Alyssa to see what happens. Search for study space scheduler, nothing comes up because while she does have access to the module, she does not have access to the overall application menu. But there's something we can do to change that so she still can see her module. So to grant Alyssa the permission that she needs, I'm going to go into my study space scheduler application And again, this is all happening as an admin, just for clarification. And I'm going to go to room requests and edit module. And I'm going to add the role, which is talking about the request viewers. And I'm going to ensure that this box override application override. I'm going to ensure that this box is selected override application menu roles. And what this will do is, although Alyssa does not have the other role that was needed to view the study space scheduler, this will allow her to still see the study space scheduler along with the module, this module, room request, because this box is checked. So when I click update and I go to impersonate Alyssa, remember before she could not see anything, although she should have been able to see the room request module. Click on Alyssa, impersonate user. And now, when I search study space scheduler, there it is. And there is the room request module, all because we clicked that checkbox and made sure it was activated. So now she has the permission that she needs to see the room requests.
The second part that we might be thinking about when we're thinking about access is granting access to our records and fields. Remember, records are stored in tables, and within the record, each column is related to a field. The way that we manage access to our records and fields is through access controls. So an access control, or ACL, that's referring to the access control list, is really just like a definition that restricts permission to allowing a user to view or interact with data. Again, it's all about security. As the system evaluates access controls, it begins with the table first. We first have to make sure that we even have access to the table. And within that table, it starts most specific and then goes to the most general ones. After the table has been evaluated, it then will go to the field. And once again, within the field, it'll go from the most specific definitions to the most general. And there are 3 ACLs. There's Table.None, Table.field, and then Table.wildcard. And let's take a deeper look into each of these.
So the first one that we'll talk about is Table.None. And I have here what it would look like in Studio. So you will have the object, which is room request, the room request table, and none. And this specific ACL is only for read capabilities. Because again, we have the 4 objects. So this is specifically for reading ability, to be able to view the records. So the way this would look is the room request, which is the Table.None, read ACL for user 1 and user 2. So user 1 and user 2 have been granted access to all of the records in the room request table, which means they can read all of them. So we're thinking about this in terms of a house. This is like if you rented out your house like an Airbnb, you have given your renter a key and they can walk through the house and view all of the rooms in the house. So another type of access control is going to be Table.field. And the Table.field ACL is going to grant access to a field within a table. And once again, inside Studio, you'll just select the name of the table along with the field. So now we also have to select the field. So for me, room request is the table and status is the field that I'm now going to be adding extra permissions on. So remember, we still have the room request.none read for both our user 1 and user 2 so that they can see the entire table. But now I'm adding another ACL. I'm going to have room request.status. Again, this is focusing on just the read capabilities for user 1 only. So what happens now? User 1 can still see everything. Nothing has been restricted for them. They can see everything, and they also were granted access to the status field from our second ACL. However, user 2 cannot see the status field because they don't have those permissions that came with the room request status read ACL. So again, if we're thinking about this in real world, we have our 2 people walking around in the house. User 1 is walking around in all the rooms and they can see all the rooms, no problem. However, user 2 doesn't have access to one of the rooms. Maybe it's like a master bedroom. They don't have access to that room because that's only for user 1. So this is why Table.field can be used to restrict specific fields within the table, and you only can do them one at a time. Each field would need its own ACL. And the final ACL type is table. It looks like an asterisk, but it's called Table.wildcard. And again, in Studio, you would just select the table name and then the asterisk. And this is special because it grants access to fields within a table that do not currently have an ACL securing it. So it's really helpful for being able to exclude fields. So we already have the room request none, which is allowing us to see all of the records. Then we have the room request.status, which is allowing only user 1 to see the status field, but not user 2. Now we're adding the room request.wildcard, and again, still for read, for user 2 only. So what does that mean? Well, the only field that had a current ACL on it was status, and that was for user 1. So what wildcard does is it grants user 2 access to everything else except status, but it also in turn will ensure that user 1 can no longer access the other fields. So that's why wildcard is great, to be able to exclude a lot of fields. So user 1 would only be able to see the status field because it already previously had control of that. And then user 2 still can't see status, but now it does have control with the requested by and the room. So again, if we think about our real world scenario, we are now in our house and user 1 has access to that master bedroom that it got from before, but that's it. They don't have the keys to any other rooms, and user 2 has access to all the other rooms except for the master bedroom. So access controls are extremely important, and let's see what it actually looks like using them inside of Studio. So first, you have to ensure that you go to the user menu and click on elevate role. You have to have the security admin role to even be able to create or modify ACLs. Of course, I'm going to be modifying mine in Studio. Remember that when you create a table in Studio, automatically access controls are created for the 4 basic ones, which are create, read, write, and delete. So you can see I have one for my rooms, my room requests, and my room request tasks. Those were created by default when I created my tables. So I also created a new access control because remember, you either can secure the whole row, which again, the row is equal to a record, or you can just do it at the column level or field level. So I wanted to make one, so these really secure the whole table, the whole record. I wanted to do one that also would just protect just the field. So I start off with the type. This is the record. The application is default. And then you have your operations that you can choose from. This will be a read operation because for each ACL, you have to have a valid operation. So mine will be read because that's what I'm securing. And then make sure it's active. And then I want to have the admin overrides as well. So users with the admin role will override this rule so that way I can still be able to edit it even if I don't meet these requirements that I will have. And then advanced would just be if I was going to use scripting, but I'm not. The protection policy, I'm just going to leave it at read only. And it determines how the application files are protected when downloaded or installed. So here, the name is important because this is where I'm going to define the object that is being secured. The object is either just the table, like the whole table itself, or the table and a field. Remember, you have to have access to a table before you can even get to the field. So mine will be both a table, the room request table, And within this table, I am securing the status field. I don't want everyone to be able to see that specific field within the room request table. You could put a description here. So this is my description, just that only specific users can view and modify the status field, like available or not available. And then when you scroll down, you also have to have the permission. What permissions do we need so that this access control can actually run? So what would be granted access? Well, we're going to define the role. This is the role that I created, just the room request approver. These are the people that approve or deny a request. And also, again, if you had clicked advanced, you also could add some scripting if necessary. And then you also can add a condition. So for this access control to allow access, you have to have the role. And if there's a condition, that condition has to be true. It has to meet those conditions. And if I had a script, which I don't, that would also have to evaluate true for this access control to grant permission. And then you would click update. And now my access control for only securing the status field for if the user has this role has been made. What does this look like? As you can see, I'm back in the main ServiceNow browser, and I still have the red circle around the user icon. So I can't stop my elevated privileges just by ending the impersonation. Remember, when you elevate the role, the only way that you can stop this is to log out, and then you just log back in. So remember my ACL, my access control that I just made. A user with the room request approval role is going to be granted permission to read the status field in the room request table. So first of all, I already created a group, room request approvers. I added the role that I wanted, room request approver, and I've added a group member, Amelia. So I'm going to impersonate Amelia because I want to see what she can see. Right now, remember, my access control granted her the ability to be able to see the status field only. That's all she has right now, nothing else. So I will go to all and type in the table name. It says security constraints prevent access to the requested page. So she does have access to the status field because that's what the ACL said. But what she does not have is access to the row. And again, a row is a record. She doesn't have access to the record itself. So that is important to know. If you are denied access to a row or a record, you are not going to be able to be granted field level access. You can't access the field if you can't even get in to the table. So we have to also ensure that when we are doing field level access, that we also are granting the user access to the row, again, which is to the record. So I'm going to go back and I am going to add in access for her to actually access the record. In the impersonation, click on the user menu, end impersonation. I'm going to go to my groups and I'm gonna type rooms. And again, we're talking about the approvers. So it makes sense for the roles. If they're going to have an approver role, it also makes sense that they have access to the table. So I'm going to add that role as well. And the role that has read access for the room request table is this role. And I'm going to move it over and click save and update. I am now going to impersonate Amelia again from my user menu. And again, use the shortcut to be able to see the list view. You just type the table name .list, and this is going to give me all the records. And now she can see all of the records because she has access, which is important because you have to have access to the record in the table first. And now also she can see the status field. And again, this happens because if the user has access to the table first and has access to view the field, then they will be able to view it. However, let's look at another person that has access to this record, but doesn't have access to the field because of that ACL. They don't have that role that's needed. So I just impersonated another person, Alejandra, and I'm going to use a shortcut again, name.list. There you go. She can see the records as well. She has access to the table. But when she clicks, there's no status field. She does not have access and she cannot view it, edit it, and work with it in any way. And that is why ACLs are important for either granting or denying access to our records in our tables and also the fields within them. And don't forget to commit all of those great changes to GitLab. Again, source control and then commit changes. Continue.
And just like that, we were able to focus on access for our application. Specifically, we focused on roles and how to create those roles and ensure that they work smoothly with our access controls. We also focused on how to add that extra layer with our application access. Our application is looking great. I know mine is, and I hope that yours is as well. And as I always say, see you next week.